All right, good morning, or excuse me, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to our first day of AMA Junior Camp. I am really excited to introduce our first guest speaker of the week. Again, my name is Kyle Thiede. I am the education specialist here at AMA, and here to help me conduct this conversation, you may remember him from this morning, and you also may remember his name. It's pretty easy to remember along with mine. Kyle Jarris, the education director, is going to help me out with this. And it gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker for the week. A longtime AMA member and event manager from Littleton, Colorado, out near Denver, Ms. Lora Knowlton. Good afternoon.
Good to see you, Laura.
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing well. Enjoying the first day of camp for sure.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. This is awesome.
Well, thank you for being a part of it. Really looking forward to it. Why don't we go ahead and get started, and you can just introduce yourself to our audience and let them know who you are and what your background is in model aviation.
Sure. My name's Lora Knowlton. I live in Littleton, Colorado, right outside of Denver. And I have always loved aviation thanks to my dad. My dad has been an aviation enthusiast since he was a little boy. And when I was a little girl, he was totally into flying radio-controlled airplanes. And so he would drag me to the flying field. And at the time, it wasn't anything that was a lot of fun. But I just remember the smell of the glow fuel. And anyway, I got to meet
smell.
Pardon me?
It still has that same smell.
Right. And I got to meet a lot of the other little kids that were there with their dads, and we were all kind of hanging out. But that obviously started this interest I had in aviation, even though I couldn't admit that to my dad. But, it really, truly was a lot of fun. My dad also did radio-controlled hydroplanes in the water. That was especially pretty cool to watch. But over the years, my dad would always take us to the airport to watch the big jets take off. I remember when 747s first came into our world, we'd go to the Seattle airport where I grew up and got to watch the very first 747 land in Seattle. And at that time, you could get really close to the runways, which was way cool. But then my dad bought a family airplane, and it was something that he always wanted to do when he got big enough. And so then we'd go on flying trips just around the Seattle area. I think I've got a photo that you can bring up of me with our family airplane. So if you notice the numbers on the back of the tail, it has an N number. So all aircraft have an N number. And ours was 1214C, and the C meant Charlie. So we nicknamed our family airplane Charlie. So my sister and I would go up. There's actually space for two little kids to sit in the back of that airplane, and my mom would sit up front. And there was a door on what we call the passenger side in the front. And then in the back, and you can't hardly see it in the photo, but there is a door right there. I had to sit next to the door. And we would take off from Boeing Field Airport, and the change in the altitude would sometimes force the door locking mechanism to pop open.
That wasn't terrifying at all.
So that door would pop open, and the way the back of the plane is shaped, it's kind of contoured. You could look right out over your shoulder and look right out the door down. So then my dad would have a hold of the steering yoke, and he'd reach behind me and try to slam the door shut so it would latch again. And then, of course, the plane's going all over. Well, who would ever think that, years later, I wanted to be a pilot. I also wanted to be a commercial pilot. It was not a lot of fun going up flying when we were kids, but somehow or another that interest stuck with me. And so when it was time to decide to go into a field in college, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be a commercial pilot, or I wanted to be an air traffic controller, or a chemist, or I wanted to go into forestry, which was a really big deal in the Seattle area. I did not pursue any of the aviation careers. I ended up going into forestry and hanging out in the woods. But there's another picture, I think, that of Charlie. It's a color photo. Just, I want everybody to see it if they can. It's kind of a cool picture. And then I also, when I got into model aviation, I found a friend who had a Piper Tri-Pacer. So there you go. There's Charlie. This is not a model. This is a full scale. Charlie's kind of a petite little airplane.
Good color scheme, though.
Yes. Yes.
Very cool looking.
Easy to spot when it's flying and up in the air. And then I think there's also a photo of me with my model Charlie. And the paint scheme isn't quite the same, but it's a great airplane. It flies really well. The model does. There you go. So it's very similar, but an easy airplane to fly for sure.
Do the doors fall open on this one too, or?
No, I made sure that the doors, latch really, really well. Yes.
I'm surprised after the terror you probably went through on that. Or did it eventually become just like, the door's open again, whatever,
Well, you kind of got used to it, but I tell you what, it was very traumatic as a kid.
I'm imagining what my wife would do if all of a sudden our kids are in the back of a plane and the door fly, like just the level of cacophony that would be going on in that cockpit. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, when the door would pop, my dad had the headset on and he was focused on flying and looking for other aircraft. So I'd have to poke him on the shoulder and then grab his shoulder. And then because of all the engine noise, you had to talk really loud and say, "Daddy, my door is open." So yeah, I mean, wonderful, great memories, obviously, but not everybody had an airplane to go take. Instead of taking a Sunday drive, we'd go do a Sunday fly. We'd fly out to the coast. We'd just, be up. One time I remember we flew around Mount Rainier, which is the big mountain.
Yeah. Wow.
That was a little scary. Yeah. But that's how I kind of got my start with aviation and radio-controlled airplanes.
Now, what year was he getting into radio-controlled airplanes? Like, was he pretty early on in the RC kind of scheme of things?
So, yeah, probably so. It was probably in 1940, early 40s is when he got interested in aviation. In model aviation, probably not until probably the early 60s, 1960 to 65 in that area. Yeah. So lots of great memories.
And then brought the family along for the fun.
Yeah, right.
Well, it sounds like model. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so as we got older, my dad had a radio that he had next to his chair, his recliner, and we lived in the landing pattern for SeaTac Airport. So all the big jets would be flying over, and he had a radio where he could listen to the tower, talk to the pilots. And so I kind of grew up with that in the background, and that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds really interesting. It sounds like aviation and model aviation kind of runs in the family. It's kind of always been there for you.
It has indeed.
Do you have any advice for any students who might be watching about how they can stay involved with this hobby? It's a hobby that a lot of people get into when they're very young. What advice do you have for people who want to stay interested in it for the long haul?
I would my advice would be to find those areas in aviation or in the radio controlled hobbies that you really like. If you like different types of airplanes, if you like Warbird airplanes versus current day airplanes, or if you like jets, stay interested in those areas. And you just never know, when you get older, there might be opportunities that come up that you can really get involved with those. I would also, if you know pilots, any pilots, maybe reach out to them, let them know that you're interested, because you never know when you might be able to get a ride in an airplane because you told that pilot that you were interested.
And pilots want to fly no matter what. So if they get somebody in there with them, yeah, they're game.
And that's one thing that I did not pursue getting my private pilot's license. I don't know why, but to this day, I do regret that. I wished I would have pursued it. So I guess, I can be involved with the radio controlled hobby, and that works for me as well.
And
your doors don't pop open.
Yeah, just tell them to. I mean,
right?
You're still involved in model aviation now too, both in your club and as a contest director. And you've helped out the AMA for a lot of years when we were doing our expos. You helped organize those. So there's ways to be involved in whatever your interest is, and that's kind of a cool tale.
Yes, that sure is. So when I grew up to be, I had a degree in forestry, but I also grew up to be really involved with special events and loved to be organized. I was a Girl Scout for many, many years and learned how to be prepared. And that's our motto, was to be prepared. And I was also the person that organizing the backpack trip, and who's going to bring the fuel for the little stove, and who's going to bring the freeze-dried food, and all those things. Well, eventually that led me to being an event manager. So I plan and manage large-scale, mostly outdoor events. You mentioned the AMA Expo, but I do a lot of big outdoor festivals. And of course, this last year, we haven't had any of those. But with that experience doing events and then my radio-controlled hobby, it was a great fit for helping the AMA manage their big expo that they, the East Coast one and the West Coast one.
Yeah. So many stories that I've heard even today from my fellow staff who, oh, you're talking to Lora. Oh, tell her I said hi. So hi from all the staff, first off.
Oh, awesome. Great.
But also a lot of great stories about how, you came through in the clinch and just helped us out as an organization. And I'm sure that's the same story for your club. I'm sure they're using you as a resource when it comes to those events and organizing things.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit. But I am a member of the Jeffco Air Modelers Club here in the Denver Littleton area, and we fly out at Chatfield State Park. And we have just over 200 members, so a really big club. I'm the membership coordinator for my club and also the treasurer. And then I'm also the contest director for a big event that we do out at our field called Warbirds and Classics over Denver, which is all large-scale Warbirds, airplanes that helped us fight for our country. It's a lot of fun. I think that there's a photo of a couple of my favorite airplanes. They're both Spitfires. If you can find those and bring those up, that would be awesome. So this is my absolute favorite airplane. This is actually out at our club flying field. And what you see in the background is what we call foothills. And then back behind those, it's hard to see, are actually the Rocky Mountains. So this airplane is what I call my pink Spitfire. And it actually is not pink, but the color, the name of the color is Desert Sand. Uh-huh. And you can't see it, but behind the cockpit where the pilot sits, there's a little round opening on the side of the airplane. And I don't know all the historical details, but that little opening, that little window was used for them to take pictures out of that photo recon. And this airplane used to fly in the early morning and late evening hours in the desert area. So the color of the airplane, the desert sand or pink, would blend in with the sand dunes. And so they could capture a lot of really cool photos. But none of the guys in my club would want to have a pink airplane. And what better person to have a pink airplane other than myself? So my husband actually built the plane. And then when it came time, okay, dear, what color do you want to make this airplane? It's like pink. And I had to really talk to him quite a bit. But his feminine side finally came out and he painted my airplane the color I wanted. So, yep. So this is my favorite airplane.
All right. Well, it looks like we have a question about it up on the screen here.
Yeah. So this is a gas airplane. I don't remember the size of the engine, but all of these, well, this one is a gas. And then I think I have another picture of a Spitfire. I just like the look of the Spitfire. I think they're pretty airplanes.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. And I got to say, I think that pink is awesome. That desert pink. I think you won on that one.
Desert sand.
Desert sand.
Desert sand, yes.
It is a really nice color.
I have not ever flown any military aircraft. I'm not a pilot. But, it takes, when you put a lot of time and effort into an airplane like this, it is very nerve-wracking to fly because you don't want to crash your airplane, most definitely. I've seen a lot of guys at my flying field who do crash their plane. They try to keep themselves composed. And then we have a little bathroom area, and though they've admitted they've got into the bathroom and shed a few tears because it's very emotional when you put so much time and effort and joy into building some of these planes that you might crash. But you know what? If you don't get out and fly them, it just to see them up in the air is really special.
Yeah.
I can imagine. It looks like we have you have another question.
Anna, why should you consider organizing a successful aero modeling event? If you have the skills and you're halfway organized, it's really very rewarding to see people come together. You do all the planning and the organizing, and you have everything there for people to have a wonderful, great experience. It's very rewarding. Then you can kind of step back and you're creating an experience for people to walk away with great, wonderful memories. So just like the AMA expos that we were talking about, a lot of people would come to those and they get to see friends, they get to see new products and really have a wonderful experience. And then they take those memories away. So,
and really trying to surround yourself with a big team to make it happen, right? Like divvy those jobs up. You're only one person. You can't do it all. Lean on your volunteers and your help.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, great question. Great question.
You just need the right attitude.
Yeah.
Yep. But I've met a lot of people along the way. So a lot of good people, and yeah, it's been fun, most definitely. was there a prototype for the the Spitfire? Yes, there was. Those were full-scale aircraft, and I know my husband and I spent a lot of time going through books that had pictures of full-scale Spitfires and those particular in that paint scheme. Yes, yep. So is the steering in the front on that plane? I believe it was. Yeah. Great questions. So, so typically, Mark has a question about how many Warbirds show up for Warbirds and Classics in Denver. I think in 2019, the last year that we held the big event, I think we had about 75 pilots, and many of them brought more than one aircraft. So I think we ended up with just a little over 100 all Warbirds, big ones, small ones. In fact, I think you might have a picture of one of my really big airplanes. It's called the Nakajima Kate. And if you can bring that one up, that one's way, way cool. It's entirely way too big for me to fly. I don't have, there you go. It is my airplane, but I am not licensed to fly it. My husband is. And this aircraft, she was the Torpedo Bomber in Pearl Harbor. So what you can't see in this picture, there's actually a torpedo that snaps up underneath. And when it's flying with a flip of a switch on your transmitter, you can drop that torpedo. And it's really cool. I mean, I have always said boys and their toys, but no, it's everybody and their toys. To see a torpedo drop is way cool. So, but yeah, that's another one of my favorite airplanes. So that airplane is so big. So the fuselage from the tail to the nose is one entire piece, obviously. And it takes 2 people to carry it from our basement hobby room up the stairs and out the front door into our vehicle, our van.
And angling, and I'm sure you have it down like to a perfect pattern.
We do actually, but I tell you what, the first couple times was a little scary. We thought we had the fuselage stuck in the stairs. The wing is actually in 3 pieces.
Okay.
Because it's so long. Mm-hmm. But and this photo was taken at our Warbird event. Okay. There's no other, you can't see any others. So she only comes out once a year for Warbird. So it's pretty special to see her fly.
Cool.
How many airplanes do I have? Great question. Between my husband and I, and not too long ago, we actually counted how many we have in the basement. And I think we were at 35, a pretty outrageous number. Some of them don't fly. Some of them are very dusty, but we counted, we had a total of, 30 plus airplanes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
there's some great questions coming through here.
So I would,
go ahead.
If this is a good time, I would love to do a little, I have a little show and tell treat, except I'm going to have to pick up my laptop.
Yeah.
And, all right. So I'll try not to make everybody too dizzy. So we're actually going to go into my bathroom. And I know this is going to be pretty weird, but so I have an aviation bathroom. And let me close the door behind me. So I collect aviation antiques and memorabilia. Let's start over on this wall. So this up here is the control panel that came out of that Piper Tripacer that I showed you in the picture a few minutes ago. My dad renovated the airplane, and this was trash, and I don't know why, but I kind of
That's not
onto
trash.
it.
That's really cool. That's a great memory.
Let me
very
see if I
neat.
can get a little bit closer. This is not really aviation, but then again it is. That is just a button from Apollo 11. And this is my dad's transmitter when he was flying radio-controlled airplanes. Here's an old model aeronautics book from 1955. Here's the radio that I was talking about that my dad had next to his chair in the recliner. This is actually a spark plug out of a B-25. This is kind of cool. This is a little salt shaker from American Airlines. So back in the day when you used to have meals on your airplane ride.
I think you definitely win the coolest bathroom award.
Thank you. Let's see. I found a hat. I've got a microphone here.
Yeah.
A gas mask, kind of, sort of.
That's really cool.
And this, a really good friend gave me. It was a pillow from Lowry Air Force Base, which is here in the Denver area. And I took the stuffing out and then I had it framed. And then let's see what we got down here. So there's a picture of a pilot that's in the Solomon Islands, I believe. And then up top, just some knickknacks and paddywhacks, as I refer to them. And let's see what we got over here. Oop, there's the toilet.
Yep, it's a real bathroom.
And then let's hang on a second here. This is an antique toy airplane. It's supposed to be a Corsair with the wings that fold up.
Wow.
And this piston out of an airplane. So anyway, that's kind of my show and tell with some cool stuff.
As far as show and tell goes, everybody else is going to be forever judged by your bathroom now. So I think you're winning.
Well, I know it's kind of a talking point, and when we have company come over, it's kind of like, hey, let's go to the bathroom. I need to show you something.
Which in and of itself is a great conversation starter.
Well, it's just, I tell you what, when I'm out looking at, I like to go into antique stores. Finding aviation pieces to bring home are really hard to find. There's not a lot out there. So
yeah,
when you do find them, it's great.
Mark jumped in and says he thinks he gave you that pillow. Mark Benson.
He did. He was the good friend. Yes.
Good deal.
Yes. So what other questions do you guys have out there?
I'm going to jump in and ask one of them. So you mentioned you were a Girl Scout, but did you earn your aviation badge?
Actually, I did. And, you know, at the time, it seemed like a natural fit with the family that I lived in. But I remember some of the things that you had to do. So on badges, to earn them, you usually had to follow like 8 or 10 of different suggestions that were listed. And then you'd have to have an adult sign off on them. So some of those were, you had to go talk to a pilot and ask them how they got started, you know, as a pilot and how long they've been interested in aviation. They also, you had to go tour an airport. And I remember doing that. That was way cool. That was the back in the days where you could, you know, get access to a lot of the areas. They didn't have all the security that they do now. So that was a lot of fun. I think one of the tours that I went in, I got to go up in the tower of the Seattle Tacoma Airport tower. And that was kind of cool. Or actually, it wasn't SeaTac Airport. I believe it was Boeing Field. So that was right next to the big Seattle airport. And then you also had to kind of like write a mini report about what makes an airplane fly, you know, talking about the weight and balance. Another thing that we had to do was, I don't know why I remember all this, but center of gravity and how you figure that out. That was kind of a cool thing.
And then I think this morning session a little bit.
Oh yeah. And then let's see, I think you also had to interview a woman that was involved with aviation.
Cool.
So it looks like there's a question about do I have STOL aircraft? I am really sorry, but I do not know what that is.
Short takeoff and land. So think of something with big donut tires that's made to kind of fly in and out of mountainous areas is kind of a traditional STOL aircraft.
So would that be like an L4 Grasshopper?
It could be, or like a Super Cub, those kind of things. I don't know if you've ever heard of Draco. Mike Pate built. It's a pretty crazy aircraft. That's a STOL aircraft.
Well, I used to have a L4 Grasshopper that I bought from a friend. It was, you know, basically like a Super Cub, sort of, all covered in yellow, you know, monocoat. Mm-hmm. I stripped it down to the frame and recovered it with green fabric covering. I hand did all of the nose art on it. And we had it for many, many years. The cockpit was so big that you could actually put our video camera in the cockpit. So my husband was very skilled at this. And so he would take off, and then all of his buddies on their airplanes, and they would fly around it to get it on video. And of course, that was before a lot of the video technology that we have.
Yeah, brand new, old school way to do it.
But unfortunately, as we say, the clock ticks on them all. And we had a pretty rough landing, and we lost that airplane. My husband didn't. He was very sad for me because he knew I was not happy, but
it happened.
So that doesn't really answer the question, but that's the closest thing I can think of. Have I ever wished for more women to be in the hobby? Absolutely. Absolutely. I've met, you know, there aren't very many women, I think, in the hobby. There are maybe 2 other women in my club of 200. It would sure be nice to, you know, we can beat the pants off some of the guys with some of our flying skills. But no, absolutely. Would really love for more women to be in the hobby. Yep.
Yeah.
So what else? What other questions do you all have?
One thing that I was curious about, you mentioned that you decided to go into forestry when you were kind of trying to decide on a career path. Has that overlapped with your interest in aviation in any way? Have they intersected in a way that maybe you hadn't been expecting?
Well, actually a little bit. It's been a long time since I've actually worked in the field of forestry, but at the time, I worked quite a bit fighting forest fires. So I was boots on the ground, so to speak, putting out the fires. And we had several fires that we were on. They had helitack crews that would come in helicopters and then drop down, and they would be able to get into some of the remote areas. So aviation played a very important role in that. Even to this day, it still does. And then a lot of the fires we were on, they had the big airplanes that would do the fire retardant drop onto those fires. So we always had to take shelter and kind of try to stay away from those areas that they were putting the retardant on. So Absolutely. Aviation played a really big role in forestry. And of course, if there was ever an opportunity to get on a helicopter, and I would always volunteer. And I think only once we got selected to go. And I will never forget that day. We had the biggest smiles on our faces. And
so
they
did you
knew
get the fast rope down, like out of the helicopter, or did it land and drop you off?
Oh, it landed.
Okay.
It landed. But we were a fire suppression crew, so we were not initial attack. We weren't. So for us to get in the helicopter was pretty special anyway. But yeah, I will never forget that. And back in those days, I had a little pocket Instamatic camera that I could put in my front pocket. And I carried that camera and I got some awesome photos. Yeah.
Sure.
But moving forward to our times today, when there's drones out there that can fly up above and see where fires are actually burning, is pretty special, because then they know how and where to focus their firefighting efforts.
Certainly.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal how that's changed. And kind of moving over into what I do today as far as event management, you don't think that aviation plays a role with that, but it most definitely does. With drones that are up, you can get some phenomenal photos over big events. You know, how many people you have. They can be great photos that you can use for promotional purposes moving forward, but you can also do a lot of studies with the information you see from a drone taking a photo, looking down at the crowd. You can see how many people you have, and you can calculate, approximately how many people you have at your event. You can also see what areas of your event are not being utilized, where you have open space.
Yeah.
So that's really valuable.
Important to note too, those are operations that are done by a licensed Part 107 pilot, which we haven't really talked about in camp yet. But there's hobby flying and there's professional flying, even when it goes back to flying over a fire or something. Obviously, little PSA for the moment: don't do that as a hobbyist. Make sure that if those are operations that are being conducted, it be done by a 107 pilot, someone who's officially allowed to do that.
And along those lines, it's because of my background and the knowledge I have about hobbyists versus professional pilots. We also often get at my large scale events, you get people who don't or do not know that they need to be, there's particular licenses and certifications that they need to have before they come fly over an event. And a lot of people don't think it's a big deal. So because of my expertise, a lot of my friends will call me the drone diva, because all the people that I hire to help me at my events, we all have little handheld radios. Mm-hmm. And people know if they see a drone flying up over an event that they don't have permission to be, I will tell them, okay, this is what you need to look for. If you see that person, don't approach them. And then they will tell me where it is. And then I will come up and I'll ask them very, very professionally and very nicely to land. And the first question I always ask them, are you an AMA member? And I've gotten some interesting responses to that question. Yeah. So, but it's good to know there's a time and a place. It can be done very safely, but there's rules to follow.
Yeah. And that's what we're all about, is being safe, informing people, because so many don't know that they're doing something that is unwarranted. So it gives everyone the opportunity to learn and grow and do things correctly and safely.
Yep. And then actually, there was a gentleman who was one of my sponsors at an event, and he didn't think it was any big deal to take his drone up because he thought it would be, cool to get some pictures. And so I didn't realize it was him until I walked around to the outside of the event, and I was like, "Oh, Gary, what are you doing? You need to land." So he landed, and I, had a nice chat with him, and he had no idea. He had just no idea. So, but But anyway, it was a great bonding moment with a sponsor, and he's
Yeah, it doesn't have to be
continued-
this. It's just
No,
about
not at
having
all.
that conversation, right?
Not at all, right? And he's come back and sponsored year after year. So,
Great.
What is the biggest airplane I have seen? Well, full scale would be a 747. I think that's the biggest one I've seen in person. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're getting close to the time. I will throw out one last call for any other questions as they come through. If anyone has something else they'd like to ask Lora. But man, I've really enjoyed this conversation myself. I'm sure Kyle T would say the same.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there wasn't any questions about some of the stuff I had in the bathroom. So,
Well, I was loving the transmitters from back in the day. You think of a transmitter now, you've got both sets of gimbals and all the switches, and it's so, easy. It's all right there. You go back further and it's push buttons. It's like 1 and 2 channels. It's a whole different beast when you think of RC in the 50s and 60s. So it was fun for me to see some of those old radios.
and that transmitter that my dad had was very boxy, very heavy, very cumbersome. It had side handles.
Yeah. So would he
Yeah.
actually sit in a chair and use it, or was he like carrying it with one arm and hitting the buttons? Or
No, I don't know how they did it, but no, they were all standing up. Yeah. One of the other things that I think I might mention is Mark brought up, didn't I spend some time de-icing? Because I love aviation so much, there was an opportunity to be a de-icer out at DIA, Denver International Airport. And I did that for 5 seasons.
wow.
And I was the bucket girl. So you could have two people on a team. So you have a truck driver, and then there would be the boom, and then at the top of the boom would be a bucket. So when I first started, there were open buckets, and kind of, if you see the power trucks around town, I was up in the bucket. I didn't want to drive. I wanted to be a bucket girl. And there was no seats up there. So you had a 5-gallon paint bucket. And in that bucket, you would have your lunch, your chapstick, your gloves, more gloves. You'd
Your
have
hot
those
hand.
you'd have those handheld heaters.
Mhm.
And so you would be, hunkered down in your bucket, sitting on your 5-gallon bucket. You had a headset on, so you knew when a jet was coming in, and then you would marshal in the airplane into place, and you'd be looking right down into the cockpit.
That takes the love of aviation to a whole nother level. Like,
Well, I
not
have to
just
tell you-
literally with the bucket, but honestly, like I love planes. Put me in a bucket, I'll de-ice them. Sure, it gets me closer. Like, that's a really cool story.
And I love the smell of jet fuel. And so I was in hog heaven, and then later when they graduated to enclosed pods,
Mhm.
all of the controls were basically joysticks and foot pedals. And if I needed to get a whiff of jet fuel, I just cracked my door open.
That's awesome.
So yeah. No, I do not have my Part 107 license. I have thought about that, and every time I get really dedicated, I get sidetracked. So I encourage all of you, don't get sidetracked. Don't be like me. Follow those things that you want to do, and do them.
I don't
And you
know.
just never
For
know.
someone who says they've been sidetracked, you've accomplished a lot, Lora.
Well, it's a lot of fun. I love what I do. Have some great memories, and yeah, it's a great, very unique hobby and interest as well.
Well, thank you for sharing so much about what makes it special. And
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Any other questions?
I hadn't seen a
Well-
few. I saw someone mention Draco was crashed. I think he's rebuilding it, so have hope. It's going to come back eventually, I believe. Mike Pate being the pilot of Draco, which was a STOL plane we referenced earlier. I guess if you have further questions, feel free to ask education@modelaircraft.org, and we can jump in and relay those questions and get you those answers. But as I said before, like, I've had a great time chatting with you, Lora. Thank you so much for sharing your aviation experiences, showing us that awesome bathroom. I mean, my goodness, that's the coolest bathroom I think I've ever seen. And it's truly been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate the opportunity to share, what I've done and where I've been, and hopefully it will have inspired some of you to go further in your aviation interests.
Sure. Kyle, tomorrow, I'm not going to give away any secrets, but we've got another awesome day of camp planned. Another lesson in the morning and another conversation in the afternoon. So make sure we don't miss that. Anything you want to say about those, Kyle, without giving too much away?
Oh, I think I'll let it stay a secret.
Okay. I like that.
I'll let it stay a surprise.
I like the idea. All right, guys. Well, if you have questions, if you jump in, feel free to make sure and jump in, ask those questions. Greatest bathroom in America. That is a great hashtag.
We'll get that.
And, I'll let Kyle take it from here. Kyle T.
All right. Thank you both again.
Thank you.